Hi everyone. Today we're going to work on a small project to show you a skill that's really useful for camp, whether it's a short camp or a long camp where you're building shelters or whatever, and it's to make one of these mallets, which are really handy and really simple to make and to use. So I'm going to make one of these today. We're going to go through, we're going to go to the forest, pick out a piece of dead standing timber, and we'll explain that a little bit later on. Bring it back here into the garden, show you how to mark it out, how to cut it, and then how to carve it. It's really simple. One of these with a little bit of practice can be made in about 15 or 20 minutes, and you'll never be without a mallet on camp again. Alright, so let's get carving. Here we are, we're in the forest, we're actually in Garley Bog. We're here, we're standing in front of a fallen silver birch. It is completely dead. I've cut into it slightly just to check that the wood is sound. So I'm here and I need to pick how thick I need. So what we're going to use is, we're going to use our fist as a guide. So make a nice big fist, and then what you're looking for is a fist thick piece of wood, which is right here in front of me. It's the same width as my fist, and that's what we're looking for. And I'm going to cut this piece here and take it home to make my mallet from there. So roughly what you're looking for is something maybe about the length of your leg to use. But please remember, look after yourself and the people that are with you when you're working with your saw or your axe. Just look after yourself, make sure everybody around you is safe. Alright, so now I'm going to put a bit through here. Take your time. There's no great rush. If you get tired, you can always take a break. You can now see that there's a good healthy timber in this log, and it'll make quite a good mallet. Okay, so just before we leave the forest, there's one more thing we need. What we need to do now is we need to figure out how thick the handle, or how big the handle of our mallet is going to be. And so we're going to use this piece of wood that I found here, just lying with this pile in the forest, to try and gauge a size. So what I'm doing, I'm just putting my hand on here. This end of it feels a bit too small for me. It's a bit too small of a handle for me. This is way too small. Up here, it's actually a bit too thick for me, so I'm not going to use that piece. But right here feels like a sort of a good, perfect size of handle for me. When you're in the forest, you might, if your hands are smaller or bigger, you might pick a different part of the branch, and that's completely up to you. So I've decided this is where there's a good handle for me, so I'm going to cut it right here, and I'm probably going to cut it there. That seems very long, but we're going to use this to help us make the mallet when we get it later on. So first of all, I'm going to cut this, and as I said, remember, you can use whatever you like. You could I still have my folding saw in my pocket, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my finger to cut it like that, and that's that piece gone. And then I'm going to cut the rest of this with my finger, but we'll do that off camera because I don't want to bore you. So here we are, we're back in the garden. It is possible to do this, to make this mallet in the forest, just wherever you find the wood. It is possible to do it all there, but we brought it back to the garden. This is a couple of days later. And now what I need to do first is I need to decide which piece of this I'm going to use for my mallet. And I'm actually going to use this slightly thicker piece at this end, from about here to here, to make my mallet. So that's the first bit, is we make that decision. And I'm just going to mark, just a quick mark for the full length of the mallet. Just before I start, I'm going to be using this saw first of all for this, but you can use any saw you have at home. You can use a big carpenter saw like this, wood saw like this something as small like this little old saw I found hanging in my shed, rusting. It's possible to use one of these, although the teeth are so fine it would take quite a bit of time. You might have somewhere in the shed, your mum or dad might have one of these in their toolbox in the shed. These sort of gardening saws, and they'll do just fine. So you can use anything you like. But now, first thing we need to do is I'm going to take this piece of wood, take the piece of wood down. This is the other piece of wood I cut in the forest. This was to give me the size of my handle. And I'm going to grab my pencil. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it down on the center of the log, and I'm going to draw around, and that gives me the handle size that I'm going to be using. So that's the handle size. And now if I take my saw and I put my saw down, this saw is almost the perfect size that if I cut in the depth of the saw, I will leave the center piece as my handle. So this thickness is perfect for what I'm doing with this saw. If I'm going to use the larger saw, all you have to do is put your saw on the piece of wood and put the teeth up against your pencil line, and with a piece of tape underneath you just mark the depth of the saw blade, and that's as far as you cut. So I'll give you a quick demonstration using a piece of tape and this other little saw, where I put the teeth of the blade on the pencil line, and then with a bit of tape I just mark the depth of the saw, and that's the depth you'll cut. And that just gives you a quick visual guide. You can leave that stuck on your saw while you're doing your cutting, and then you're back down here. So I've decided the full length of the saw. Now I want to decide how long the head is going to be. So when we said earlier on we were going to make the head about as thick as your fist, well, I'm going to make the head just a little bit longer than my fist, and I'm going to mark it here like this, and then the rest of this then is handle. So we have head and handle, and what we're going to do is we're going to cut the handle section first, and we won't cut the actual head off until we're finished. It makes it easier to handle and easier to use. So what we do is we cut all the way through until we're at about the right depth, and you just move around. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just move around and mark the whole thing so I know where I'm working. So for this cut, you're not cutting all the way through. You're cutting, I'll just take this saw up here for a second. You're cutting only down to the depth you want. But the trick is to cut it all the way around. And again, it doesn't matter which saw you use. Just keep cutting. Take a bit of time. There's no rush. With a project like this, if you get a bit tired, you can take a break. But it doesn't take very long to get all the way through. So as we said, I've done this cut. I'm leaving the head cut for the moment because I want to work on the handle. So now I'm going to take this out, bring over my piece of little chopping block. Now, the piece of wood we've cut to use as a batten comes in quite handy. And then what you're going to do is you're going to batten off you're going to work your way around battening away timber that you don't need. At the beginning, when the wood is thicker, the battening is a little bit trickier because you don't have an awful lot of blade to hit. But as it gets thinner, it gets a bit easier. As you move down, now you can see I've started to clear out a piece of wood, and I'm starting to get into the handle. Now I'm just going to stop here for a second. This is probably a good time just to talk about knife safety, saw safety. You see I have an axe here with me as well, which you could use, but just remember your knife safety, your safety circle. Make sure there's nobody around you, especially younger members of your family and people that may not understand knife safety. I know we've talked about it quite a bit, but other people may not understand. So when you're doing this, just keep in mind the people around you and keep it safe. So take your time. My piece of battening timber has turned out to be more rotten than I thought it was, and it's falling apart, but I think it'll be all right to finish the job. Oh, there goes my batten, I think. As you can see, I've started battening down, and you can see now the handle is starting to take shape. It's starting to get down. It's still a bit too big, but I still have cut line to take away. So take your time. As you can see, I got myself a new batten out of a piece of old Christmas tree. And you can just walk away around the edges to bring your handle down. And as I say, as you go, keep taking it in your hand, feel it, see, is it too big, is it too small? Remember, you want to work your way down gently, because you can always take stuff away if it's too big, but you can't put the wood back on if you've taken off too much. We've walked away, we found, like, I'm going to stop there. I'll finish this off myself a bit later on and show you the finished product. But I'm going to work on the head now. So we have a handle. We can pare this down, we can shave it down with our knife to get it much more comfortable. As you can see, it's quite rough and angular at the moment. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the head, and I'm going to show you how we work the head then, just to get it. And now we're going to cut the head. I'm going to just drop my batten away. So remember, I marked where I wanted to cut the head, and so now we're going to cut. For this cut, we go all the way through. And this is why we keep this bit on till the end, because it makes cutting it and shaping it much easier, and it gives us something to put our knee on and lean on. And now, it takes a bit of doing, sometimes depending on the wood and how you've done it, but that's roughly what you're looking for, is a mallet made out of one piece of wood. We have roughly our shape, and you could actually use the mallet like it is now, but there was a few knots and stuff, lumpy bits on this, and so I'm just going to tidy them up. There's a couple of ways you can do it. If you have a sharp axe, you can use a sharp axe to just slice off the lumpy parts. If you have a sharp axe, that's a good way of practicing. And you can use the axe to clean off the bark stuff before you use it. You can use it with the bark on, but usually what will happen is as soon as you start to hammer anything, the bark starts to break and it goes sort of lumpy and messy. So we want to try and take that off. Another way to do it is you still have your saw. You can take the saw to the lumpy parts, and you can cut the difficult bits off. But we also still have our knife, and so we can, a bit like making feather sticks, and actually this stuff that you take off when it's dry will actually make very good fire starters. Actually, while we're on that subject, this is birch, and we have birch bark here. So when you're shaving this birch bark off, save the outer surface of the bark, this silvery stuff part, because it makes a very good fire starter, because there's a natural oil in it and it lights a bit like a candle. So you might save some of that, larger lumps of it like this. When they dry out, you can put them in a fire starting kit in your bag, and they can be really useful for starting fires. Just going to shave the bark off with the knife. This bark is coming off quite easily, really. Some bark might be a little bit more difficult. And then we're going to just clean off the edges. What we're going to do here now is, we've got the mallet just more or less made, and it's quite fine. You could use it like this. But there's a couple of things you can do just to make it that little bit better. And what I'm going to do here is, I'm going to shave off just the very edge of the mallet, walking around, and you're not taking big lumps off, you're just doing a bit of a tidy up, a little bit of a tidy up, so you get a sort of a shaved edge of on the edge of the mallet, and that helps to stop the wood splitting at the ends of the mallet when you're using it. And I'm going to do the same along this side. It's just a little easier, because the handle's there, just to do it this way. You see, I'm just using, not trying to take loads off, slicing through and just tidies off the end, and then you have a reasonably cleaned off mallet. It's got a nice heavy head. You can knock it, and the great beauty of these is that, because with a little bit of practice it only takes about 20 minutes or so, maybe 15 minutes to make one, especially if you just do a very quick and basic one like this, is you don't need to bring a mallet with you on camp. You can just go to camp, all you need is your knife and a saw, and you can make yourself a mallet. And this will be good enough for putting in large stakes, driving in pieces of timber to make frames for cooking, building shelters, anything at all that you could come up with. We're almost finished. There's one last thing that I would probably do, as well as I'm just going to tidy up this handle a little bit. I'm going to put the chamfered edge on the handle as well, just for one last little bit. But I'm also going to drill a hole in here so that I can put a piece of paracord in and have a little lanyard, similar to what I have on my saw here. So here we are. This is more or less the finished product. I might do a little bit of tidying up and a little bit of cleaning off. As you can see, I drilled the handle, put a piece of paracord in. Just be careful if you're going to make the hole. When you drill the hole, do a little sort of countersink with a larger bit as well, and that will just help protect the hole. But really all it is, hold the lanyard. It means that you can hang your mallet up in the forest or on camp, and keeps it nice and tidy. And should serve you quite well for quite a long time if you look after it. But as I said, now you know how to make one. You can make one anytime, anywhere. Alright? Have a go. Please, if you have a go at making one, post whatever you make. Remember, they don't have to look exactly like this. It can be a bigger head or a smaller head. It can have a much smaller handle. I made it this length so that When you're doing sort of small work, battening things, you can put your hand right up against the head and you have nice control. If you want to really hit something hard, you can move your hand down the handle. That's why I chose sort of the handle size and head size that I did. Remember, make it to fit your own hand. Fist size, so it fits your hand, and then the handle, make the handle to fit you. Keep paring it down until it feels comfortable, that you can get a good strong grip on it. Okay? Happy carving.